Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
What's gone wrong with Britain? In a land where nothing works, the distinguished historian A.G. Hopkins offers an explanation tracing Britain's current problems to decisions made in the 1980s. I'm delighted to say that joining me live on the line now is the author of A Land Where Nothing Works, What's Gone Wrong with Britain. It's A.G. Hopkins. Good morning, Prof. How are you, sir?
Morning, I'm fine, thank you.
Good to have you with us. Right then, just explain a little bit about who for those who don't know who you are, and so why you're so eminently qualified to write this book.
Well, I don't see myself as eminent, but briefly, I am emeritus professor at Cambridge University, and I work on international history, but also on British history to the extent that it involves British expansion overseas.
So what was the starting point? What was the, if you like, the chispa, the spark, as we say, behind the book?
Yes, thank you. The starting point was actually not historical, except to the extent that it reflects my views on my own long life. The starting point was the world around us in Britain today, which uncontroversially can be said to be fairly dire. If you look around, the public services have been decimated. There is now more economic, social, and regional inequality than there used to be. Productivity growth is bad, investment is low. I could go on, but wait, one more point. It's not just economic. The politics of our country have also suffered in public esteem. People no longer trust politicians. There is grave doubts about the utility of our two-party system in the modern world. And finally, the whole notion of what it is to be British has come under question because, as we see, there are independence movements, not only in Scotland, but now gathering pace in Wales too. And even if they don't succeed, they are evidence of a discontent with the outer regions of Britain.
When we because politicians, and we talk about a mistrust of politicians, but politicians, yes, opposition politicians, are the first to use broken Britain. You hear it from the Conservatives, from Reform, from everybody saying Britain is broken. But does their broken Britain, because they're looking at services, etc., whereas what you're looking at, perhaps, is a breakdown in society and where that comes from?
Yes, I think it's what you say, but it's bigger than that. However one describes broken Britain, and I've just given you my summary, which I think will suit many people, you do need to understand how we got into this situation. Now, most explanations, including those who use the term broken Britain and so on, will go back perhaps to the crisis of 2008, because that led to austerity. That led, of course, unfortunately, COVID intervened as well. So the whole statistics of welfare income have been very bad since that time. Now, I accept that, but it's not good enough. 2008 didn't just appear like that. We have to go back further to see how the conditions that led to 2008 came about. And that's what my book tries to do.
I mean, do you think that things were better during the 60s? And people go about the 60s was a golden period. The 70s, I mean, we had the trade union movement, we had the 3-day week, we had an energy crisis. Strange that, we had fuel prices going through the roof. And the 80s, people seem to think it was all Thatcherism and everybody had a new car and bought their own council house. But of course, there is always a flip side. So are we not just looking through, if you like, rose-tinted spectacles? And isn't that the human condition to always say, oh, well, things were better in the olden days?
Yes. Well, that's a very good point. And there is that sense of nostalgia also that creeps in, because most of us like to feel well, that we were happy when we were young, whatever our circumstances, and as we get older, it's less easy. However, it is possible to step away from those subjective opinions and look at really quite objective measurements and criteria. And you put your finger on something very important in referring to the 60s. And indeed, as you say, it has been called a golden age. But what happened was after 1940, let me step back.
Right.
Between 1945 and the present, you can think of two distinct phases, not only of economic policy, but of life in Britain. The first phase, 1945 to 79, you had the makings of a social democracy, led by the Labour government, but also supported mainly by the One Nation Tories. And that was a determination to build a more prosperous and more united country after the nightmare of the war and the world slump and so on. That's how we got a welfare state. That's how we got education system expanding, welfare provision, the NHS. And also there was a post-war boom of recovery, which helped float these policies. So it wasn't just a matter of great men. Circumstances favored them. Now you're quite right. You get to a turning point in the 70s. And I can't go into the causes of this, but we just accept there was an upheaval. The 1960s boom, 50s, 60s boom had sort of come to an end. And you had the things you referred to, the strikes and so on. It was these that created an opportunity for Margaret Thatcher and her supporters to come to power with a program which said the welfare state and all that social democracy has failed. We need to move from community values to individual values. And that second phase is the one that we're in and still at the moment.
And the thing is, of course, that we talk about building a land fit for heroes after 45. And there is, as you mentioned before, and the empire shrinks. And again, people these days will go, oh, the empire when Britain was great. But we need manpower. So we call out and we go through this period where the empire shrinks. Nations, because of the Second World War, is part of the covenant that, young men from all over the empire answered the call. African nations are represented, especially in Middle Asia, India, what will become Bangladesh, Pakistan. They send millions over to fight, etc. And they get their independent status. But then we need manpower, and they come back. And that first wave, if you like, of immigration, and the Windrush generation as well, coming out of the former Caribbean, and they get independence as well. They are we need the manpower, and so they are. It is not viewed in the same way as perhaps second or third generation will, because there is an inbuilt fear of the others, if you like, within Middle England, and that sets the scene as well to what we now have, Professor.
Yes. I think that's all correct. And I can enlarge it a little bit, because if you think of the concept of Britishness, and if you ask somebody in the street today, what is it to be British? I think they'd be struggling. But if you ask people after 1945 through to the 70s, something, through to the 60s, they'd know Britishness was based on the empire. It was based upon the church, and it was based on the monarchy, which had a very high standing because of its role in staying in London during the war.
Yeah.
Now, if you fast forward, these three things have gone. The empire has gone most obviously. Church attendance collapsed from the 60s. And without being too controversial, the monarchy has struggled to become quasi-democratic in a modern world. and has lost some of the aura and respect it had.
Because that relationship between High Church, Church of England, and in a month when we put a female Archbishop of Canterbury in there, and the monarchy, you could almost trace it all back from, okay, maybe not divine right of kings, but certainly the monarchy has been embedded from Charles II onwards as part of, Hanoverians not being sort of in there. Let's not go down but the whole Act of Union is linked to Anne, etc. And so therefore they're an integral part of how we, as perhaps, people who are born before 1980, view being British / English.
Correct. You could do my job for me, I think. Yes, you're right. And so the consequences today, having lost or diminished those things, which were the core of Britishness, we're not sure who we are. And when you think of the flag of St. George being flown in an attempt to create a kind of Englishness, but then the irony is the Scots and the Welsh are much clearer about who they are than the English are. So that sense of disunity is one that has developed in the last 30 years.
Interesting, you mentioned community and a breakdown of society. Two things that Tebbit says, Lord Tebbit, was, who do you support in cricket as a thing of Britishness or Englishness, but also my father got on his bike famously and looked for work. And society breaks down as people go in, as old mining communities, the old heavy industries break up, and those communities get fractured. However, the communities that do have family hierarchies are those communities, those new communities arriving in the UK in the 50s and 60s, i.e. the former colonies, especially India, Pakistan, etc. And there must be a delicious irony when you write about social breakdown, because people are now saying, oh well, the problem with quote unquote immigrants is the fact that they all know each other and they've all got cousins, and yet we used to be like that, Professor.
Well, I think that's a very good point, and what you say is correct, but it has created a problem, because the communities that you refer to correctly as being well integrated are not always well integrated with whatever it is to be British. And so it's this question of whether you can have a sense of multi-nationality, multiple affiliations. You can, but it doesn't just happen. It has to be worked at. If I may take a quick example, we allow people in to the extent that we do, and that's more or less it. The Germans, the immigrants to Germany are taken aside. They learn German for a year. So there are different ways of doing this, and I don't think our way has been particularly successful so far. So
when it comes to, you see, the thing is, of course, one of the, and again, as an immigrant living in, there's a delicious irony here, Tony, about speaking to a radio station, obviously in Spain, that's English language, because we have communities over here, and it's quite a wry smile, because one of the things about having an empire is the fact that we don't have to learn languages, really, the English, because that's one of the byproducts is that the world kind of speaks English, and so therefore we don't need that lack of languages, and that lack of it means that we don't integrate so well, and then we're never immigrants, we're expats, Professor, which is always quite delicious.
Indeed. Can I just sort of take a tangential problem that you allude to indirectly? Is that there is a huge population problem, which is in current politics, linked with immigration. And one has to be very clear about this, and current politicians are unfortunately not. Birth rate is declining throughout the developed world. Now, if you want to stop that happening, because, of course, in the long run, you'll have an increasing elderly population supported by a decreasingly younger population. You have two choices, putting it crudely. You either have to fund families considerably, and I'm putting that, even that doesn't necessarily solve the problem, but it's an important element. If you don't want to do that, you've got to have immigration.
Yeah.
So you see, parties like Reform, or any of the standard parties, I don't think they've grappled with that. in an explicit way, because either option is expensive. If you allow in immigrants, if you're going to give them a chance to be integrated, you've got to fund that integration process. And if you don't want that, you've got to fund, quote, English British families.
Yes, but the thing is, because we go back to 45 and a land fit for heroes, and there was thought, and there was public, and I know this is a word that makes people roll their eyes, but public service. And I'm not going to bang on about how 1939 produces the greatest generation, but they were called onto a job and they did it. Okay. And they did it in many cases, traveling thousands of miles around the world to die in some corner of a foreign field. And you would like to think that, everybody goes about, Churchill, yes, fine. But there are the people who structured the NHS, who put the housing in prospect, who make sure that, there are no slum. And that is done not because they want to retire and become a non-corporate director or a chairman of a company at the end of it after 4 years, because they believe in public service. And that is something perhaps that our modern generation of politicians in a TikTok and social media age do not grasp, perhaps. And that's what we need to reinvest, Professor.
Well, I am with you, and it's in my book in quite a big way, because the collapse of community through the failings of the three big institutions I've referred to, among other things, and of course there have been economic changes. We shifted from manufacturing and mining communities to a more fluid finance, social services economy, which has a greater fluidity and mobility. So there is a great difficulty. And of course, just to go back to the Windrush generation, with Enoch Powell's notorious Rivers of Blood speech in the 1960s, you see that occurred because the empire had been kind of demobilized. And so people didn't have the right to come as they had in 1945. So they restricted immigration. And that, of course, also started to play upon racial feelings and so on. And that's been developed subsequently, as we well know. So how to get back to community is indeed a crucial question. And if I had the answer to that, you'd have to pay me a lot of money for it.
But the thing...
okay, sorry, after you.
The thing is, though, but we saw the, I'm not saying we saw the sunny uplands of community, but we saw the green shoots. Surely during COVID, we had people applauding and looking out for their neighbours, and people saying, yes, it's so nice because we live in our own little bubbles now, and a lot of the younger generation live on their screens, and they don't, I was talking to somebody about my goddaughters who are in their teens, about youth clubs. Okay, Spain is perhaps different. It's got more of an outdoor communal living space. But, go to the UK and mention a youth club and people look askance at you and go, well, we don't know who our neighbours are.
Okay, you've made a tremendously good point. I agree with it entirely. It is possible to create or rather recreate a sense of community. Now, here I'm going to say something that I hope will be controversial, and that is that the path we have followed is very much that one laid out by the United States, which is ultra-individualism. Now, there are alternatives. You just mentioned Spain, and of course it goes beyond that. If you go to many continental countries, you will find that the centers of towns still have small shops. And the reason for that is there is a sense of community. People do not go out to the shopping mall once a week like raiders and come back. They go shopping on average some like 3 times a week because it's a social function. So you see, you're right. It is possible, even in a quote-unquote capitalist society, to manage things so that community is put to the forefront. Have I time for one more illustration?
You do indeed, Professor.
Okay. So another example of the building of communities, which happens in continental Europe, I'm not holding them up for perfection, by the way, it's just that we have things we can borrow, is this. From the 1990s, they have begun to build what are known as 15-minute cities. And 15-minute cities, they're dotted around Europe now, are those cities where the principle is that you have to live within 15 minutes by cycle or walk of a community, of a parade of shops, which will enable grandma to get there somehow and get her shopping and also have a coffee at the same time. Now, I've been in one recently, Utrecht, in the Netherlands. It's fantastic. They've kept the cars out. They've increased the public service buses. You can walk through the center of town without being drowned or with exhaust fumes and so on. And it really is not perfection, but it is a success. It can be done. But the moral for me, following your previous reference to Spain, is we need to stop looking at the United States, which has more inequality than we have, and start to look at selectively at countries on the continent which have done the things that would create or recreate community here.
And of course, if we invest in our communities, if we invest, and I know that you're a professor, so in our education, because fear comes out of lack of education. You fear somebody who looks different to you because you don't understand their culture, because you haven't been taught that. So therefore, if we teach, and I'm not going to sound like some sort of hippie professor, but if we teach, I believe the children are our future, as somebody once sang, but if you educate young people, if you get them off their screens, or you make sure that what they're watching is accentuating our similarities, rather than our differences, then you can educate people, and they can, and also they will want to stay in the UK, and they will want to do, if you're talking about, the greying of our demographics, well, we need more care staff. We need to give them better wages, so it's more attractive to people who are quote unquote British, and that education, and the fact that there should be a social contract. And I'm going to get off my soapbox now and stop singing the Internationale, but from whence I'm coming here, Professor.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, we live in a knowledge economy at all levels, higher level and at, I won't say lower level, different level of understanding one another. And the countries which invest most in education are actually among the most successful in all levels. And unfortunately, our kind of mantra of low taxation, minimal government, has not been successful. It'd be wonderful if this wealth had trickled down so everyone was happy at the bottom of the pile, but they're not. They're not.
Yeah.
Our biggest growth industry during COVID and afterwards was, of course, food banks.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a big growth industry. But if you just let me give you two examples. Denmark and Finland have been rated consistently over years as the two happiest countries in the world. Now, they spend a lot of money on education. They have zero natural resources. It's all done through human skills. And do you know that they work a 32-hour week as they do in the Netherlands because their productivity is so high? And this has social consequences because dad or mum gets home from work earlier. The family can have a meal together. It sounds simple, but that is the core of the creation of community.
The book is called The Land Where Nothing Works, How Britain Lost the Plot. It's by Professor A.G. Hopkins, who is speaking to today. Professor, if people want to follow you online, I know we decried the evils of social media or on screen. Tell me you don't TikTok, but can we find you online?
Just a second. Oh. Apologies, the sun has come round.
Oh, blimey. There you see, the sun's come up, you see.
Now you have, at the last minute, found a weakness. Your rapier has gone under my ribcage. No, I'm not. It's mainly because I am so old that I actually lived through much of what my book is about, that I have been slow to adapt. And also, it may sound silly. It's mainly age. But it's also, I'm actually, despite my age, I'm terribly busy. And I feel that once I get involved in this, I'm going to be blogging this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And I think, let everybody else do that. I know that I'm not doing myself a favor in confining myself to email, WhatsApp, and that, but that's how it is.
Well, listen, my rapier may have found its way under your guard, but I think you parried that most successfully. The book is called The Land Where Nothing Works, How Britain Lost the Plot. Listeners, you can order it via our own virtual bookstore. It is by Professor A.G. Hopkins. Professor, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today.
I'm delighted to be interviewed by you in such a friendly way. Thank you so much.